It was around 3 in the morning. I was having a conversation with my friend Baron about New Super Mario Bros. U, as two grown men typically do on a Tuesday night. However, he did say something that I found very interesting. It was something along the lines of, blooming like a 2 is disappointing as a 2-6. And while I was debating that claim, something struck to me, as a 2-6. It is the moment we both realized there are feelings we associate with certain levels being labeled as -6. While I knew there was a pattern where it came to the first level of the world, I did not anticipate it for it to also apply to the last. And after further discussion, we were able to map out a somewhat consistent structure for all the worlds in New Super Mario Bros. U. This video is a synthesis of our findings. Note that as nothing more than modders, our understanding of how the game is designed is rather limited. We do not have any developer insights. We are working with what the game presents us. And with that out of the way, let's look at the general pattern that we were able to outline. First of all, we need to outline all the levels that happen to be relevant for analysis. Tower levels are a purposeful departure from the theme of the area it takes place in, to break off the world between its two sections. Because of that, it intentionally distances itself from the rest of the world. They happen to have absolutely no bearing on the pattern I'm going to establish later. Their position on the world is completely irrelevant. Whether they're the 3rd, 4th, or 5th level, it will have absolutely no impact on the other levels of the world. Castle levels are in a similar situation, although their position means that they do have a consistent pattern, typically feature a mechanical or a man-made primary gimmick, and have a boss at the end. It just so happened that those aspects are rather uninteresting, because those aspects that are pretty obvious and are highlighted by the game itself. Notably by the fact they have an icon instead of a number, and that they share a consistent theme among themselves. Airship levels also happen to be completely irrelevant, even more so than towers and castles, as airships are not only infrequent, there's only 2 in the game, one in Soda Jungle and the other one in Barren Clouds, but they were also meant to be secluded from the rest of the world. 5 airship taking place before the proper introduction of World 5, and 5 airship taking place after the castle. Just know that airships are always meant to be an extra level that's meant to transition from one world to another. So with those exceptions out of the way, let's outline the pattern we found in the game. The first level of a world, or X-1 as I will call them, are striking first levels that typically introduce a new mechanic. A new mechanic sounds like a given, but in New Super Mario Bros. U they're rather sparse. In the first half of the game, those mechanics more heavily define the world, while in the second half they're more simple and self-contained. Note that what I mean by a world-defining mechanic isn't necessarily one that is consistently present. Stone Eyes only appear in 2 levels in the entire game, one of which is not even in Layer Cake Desert. But they are present in every level's background, as well as in the form of a tile set in Spike Spouting Sand. Stone Eyes feel like an essential part of the aesthetics of the world. Additionally, the first level of the world typically feels a fair bit more traditional than the rest of the world. Elements such as pipes and blocks are more prevalent, enemies are typically not overly specific to the theme of the world, but instead more classic like Goombas, Koopas, Piranha Plants. In fact, Piranha Plants are featured in every first level of a world with the exception of 8-1 Meteor Modes. The second level of a world typically offers a twist on the existing theme, exploring a different side of the area. The enemies featured in that level are typically far more thematically appropriate for the world. Those levels are also the opposite of the first level, as they typically only feature returning mechanics, specifically from New Super Mario Bros. Wii, and they're usually the most blatant example of mechanic reusage in the game. The second half of the game features a lot more subdued variation of the world, while the first half is a lot more harsh, resorting to underground as the main setting of the level. The third level of the world is probably the hardest one to properly outline in any sort of way. Really, the only way to describe them is as a wild card. They seem to have a bigger focus on enemy with more advanced or specific behavior, or at least feature one enemy with such behavior. It also happened to be the only appearance of such enemy, or at least one of very few other appearances. The third level also typically features a change of scenery, typically using the secondary background of the world. The fourth and fifth level actually come in a pair, because they typically have very similar ideas, even if they end up being radically different. Those are the pair of platforming focused levels. They typically have as their main mechanic a type of moving platform that is commonly present throughout the level. The platform often represents the majority of the level, although it doesn't always mean that it's the only piece of terrain. One of them is typically an athletic level or athletic adjacent. Enemies often take a backseat in these levels. They're still present, but often combined with the platform to be more threatening, rather than being a particularly strong force on their own. One or both of the levels may also have a variation on the theme of the world, whether it's through a complete change of scenery or simply a unique tileset or background. The sixth and typically final level of a world is typically a bombastic closure to a world. It often features a mechanic that, for lack of a better term, is big. One that is really prevalent throughout the level, although unlike the 4th and 5th level, it doesn't always lead to a level that is more focused on platforming. That mechanic also doesn't necessarily need to be a platform. The only requirement is that it's big, imposing, and significant. It often features the most thematically appropriate enemies for its world, even if the theme of the level is not always the same as the theme of the world. This is rather hard to put in words, but while the level might not have the theme that best represents the world, it does feel like it encapsulates the appeal of the theme of each world. This will become clearer once we actually move to examples. There's also the secret level of the world. I was originally going to call that X-7, but it just so happened that in the entire NSMB series, there's only one X-7 that is a secret level, and it's not in this game. The secret levels have objective aspects to them that can bind all of them together, such as having an icon instead of a number, unless it doesn't, allowing you to skip a world, unless it doesn't, only having 300 seconds on the timer, unless it doesn't, and having no checkpoint, unless it does. Their most important quality that they all share is that they are only accessible via a secret exit of another level. Those levels are typically very gimmicky, often having a pretty standout mechanic even if that mechanic isn't very complex. Their set pieces are often very memorable and they feel very grandiose. They're also often a fair bit harder than the main levels of their world, due to the fact they also unlock something. There also seems to be a certain logic when it comes to split path. It appears that a lot of split paths usually occur after the first level, or before the last. That means the 2nd and 3rd level, as well as the 4th and 5th level, which is why I paired them up earlier. The two levels of split path typically share a quality with each other. This allows their difference to be highlighted when looking at them both, while not fully missing the experience of the other if you only play one of them. Finally, the enemy ambush features an enemy previously seen in the world or one that will appear in the very next level. Rapid firing through them, we have Piranha Plants in 1-5, Fire Bros in 2-3, Jumping Jeepies in 3-3, Cooligans in 4-2, Boos in 5-4, and Fuzzy in both 7-2 and 7-5. Now that we've established a general pattern with broad descriptions, let's take a look at the individual world and see how it applies more specifically, as well as noticing any inconsistencies between what I've outlined and the actual worlds found in NSMBU. First off, we have Acorn Plains, which due to being the first world, has the task of introducing us to the game as a whole, which means that a lot of what I discussed earlier applies on the game scale. The first level, Acorn Plains Way, introduces the brand new power-up, the Super Acorn, Wall Wings, and Moving Semi-Swords. Those mechanics are pretty defining of Acorn Plains. The semi-swords are meant to resemble the mountains in the background, and the fact that they move fits with NSMBU more lively vibe. It uses very traditional enemies such as Goombas, Koopas, and Piranha Plants. It features classic elements such as brick blocks, pipes, question mark blocks, a red cone ring, everything that is typically found in the Mario level. Our next level is Tilted Tunnel, which is interesting because it's an underground level, which isn't an expansion of the theme, at least not in a way that is specific to Acorn Plains. Instead, it feels like an expansion for the game itself, introducing the idea that not every level will be strictly above ground. The enemies it uses is also befitting of NSMBU as a whole. Buzzy Beetles are a pretty common SMB1 enemy, and NSMBU is a game that bases its level design on it. The crystal blocks are also a mechanic previously seen in NSMBU, although they are a lot more dynamic, rapidly moving in place rather than swaying around left and right. Now that's where we reach an interesting point, because we only have 3 levels left, but my parent would have 4 levels. They end up doing something rather interesting for Yoshi Hill, as they seem to combine elements of an X-3 and an X-4. Multi-moles are pretty prevalent enemies throughout the level, but they're also a level that put more emphasis on platforming, especially in its second half. 1-3 is also the first level that features the secondary Acorn Plains background. Mushroom Heights is the most perfect example of an X-4, as it has athletic music, takes place in the sky, and doesn't feature any regular solid terrain. This can also be felt as it's in the introduction of the Balloon Baby Yoshi, which is supposed to help you with platforming. Rise of the Piranha Plants is the final World 1 level, and in a similar vein to Yoshi Hill, encapsulates the element of both an X-6 and an X-5, although in this case it's a lot closer to an X-6. It features tilted and moving semi-solids, but also big Piranha Plants. They're often placed in a way that makes them a very overwhelming threat throughout the level. It does encapsulate the appeal of the world with the semi-solids, but also of NSMBU as a whole, a game that is much more lively and active than the previous game, that on the surface references a lot of Mario World, but deep down is much more inspired by SMB1. Additionally, since 1-4 and 1-5 are on a split path, they share a trait with each other, that being that they both feature big Piranha Plants. Note that those traits can be rather shallow. Moving on, we have Layer Cake Desert, which unlike Acorn Plains has a 6-numbered level, which should make things easier, and easier they are. Stone Eye Zone, as mentioned previously, has a striking new mechanic, the titular Stone Eyes, that define the world, and a set of classic enemies, Goombas, Koopas, Paratroopas, Piranha Plants, and Wall Wings, rather than more thematically fitting ones. Perilous Poke Cave features more thematically appropriate enemies, such as Pokies, as well as a mechanic that debuted in New Super Mario Bros. Wii. In fact, sand spouts in New Super Mario Bros. Wii were the defining mechanic of its world. Fire Snake Cavern is a wild card that has pretty standout enemy that only appears in this level, the Fire Snake. Otherwise, it's a level that doesn't really have anything notable that it shares with other X-3s. Those levels are the most blatant example of a split path that has two levels share a trait, as they both happen to be underground levels that feature darkness. Two underground levels next to each other is rather uncommon in New Super Mario Bros. U or the New Super Mario Bros. Series as a whole. 2-3 also has a change of scenery as it uses the secondary background for World 2, but since it's on the split path with 2-2, both levels have the alternate layer cake desert background. They also both happen to have a Yoshi. 2-2 has a green Yoshi, and 2-3 has a glowing baby Yoshi. Spike Spouting Sand sees the return of the sand spouts alongside spikes and flying question mark blocks. Unlike the sand spouts in 2-2, they are used much more thoroughly in situations that focuses more on platforming. This level also features a unique rune style set, which means that 2-4 is a variation on the existing theme, but those runes are also meant to make the level look ever so slightly more athletic due to its lack of proper terrain. Dry Desert Mushrooms, on the other hand, is the actual athletic level of the world, featuring mechanics such as stretching shrooms and line-controlled moving platforms. And like 1-4, takes place mostly on mushroom platforms, with the only actual piece of terrain being at the very end. Those two levels are a split path, and the trait they share is that they both feature spikes as the main enemy of the level. Blooming Lakitus is the final level and is a little interesting, as it's a little hard to point out to one singular mechanic that feels big. It does extrapolate the desert elements found in the world to what feels like their natural endpoint, notably the quicksand taking up the entire course, as well as Palm 3 being a prominent platform throughout this world and especially this level. The Lakitu acts as a thematically fitting enemy of that level, although its association with desert is purely retrospective. In New Super Mario Bros. U, he's much more prominent in sky levels. Even more so since Lakitus in this level don't throw spinies, but instead piranha plants. Afterwards we have Sparkling Waters, which was one of the most interesting ones to discuss with my friend Baron, as we found something very interesting about this one. Waterspout Beach is the first level of this world and is perfectly in line with the last two. It doesn't feature any classic enemies outside of piranha plants, instead opting to use Hucket Crabs, which were introduced in New Super Mario Bros. Wii. Cheep Cheeps are also present throughout the level, although they mostly serve as decorations since they're typically underwater. It does feature a striking first mechanic in the form of the aforementioned water spouts, which will make many other appearances all throughout the world. Tropical Refresher is the second level and immediately introduces us to this world's secondary theme. While underwater is very different from beach aesthetically, it's still a theme that is in large associated with beach worlds. This level also somehow features an enemy that has otherwise only been seen in New Super Mario Bros. Wii, the Big Urchin. Overall, this level has a thematically fitting enemy and introduces us to a variation of the world's theme. Next up is Above the Cheep Cheep Seas, and this is where we start to run a bit of a problem. 3-3 is a level that doesn't present us with any particular enemy that is striking and make their only appearance, nor does it introduce us to a change in the scenery that would stick for the rest of the world. This level takes place above ground and features scale platforms. By all intents and purposes, this is an athletic level, which would fit for an X-4, and spoiler alert, this applies for the rest of the world as well. The reason is that the Haunted Shipwreck takes the spot of an X-3 in this world. While it doesn't perfectly match the description of my outline, X-3 seem to be more loose with what they may actually be compared to the other slots. The level does feature a unique enemy in the form of Fishbones, who make one of the only appearance in the second zone. The background, while different from the previous level, is also completely unique to this level and doesn't reflect the second half of the world. It does seem that when making their worlds, ghost houses were taken into account as full-on numerical levels, which I find pretty interesting. When I was playing NSMBU early on, I remember having a hard time remembering 3-3 as 3-3, and something in my mind always thought of it as 3-4, and I believe I have a better understanding as why now. Moving on, we have Urchin Shoals, a level that focuses on a combination between the water spouts previously seen in 3-1 and the urchins of 3-2. While not an athletic level like 3-3, it does feature a high density of urchins in such a way that the level is also decently focused on platforming. This level also features both a unique tile set, made of individual blocks, and a background that is more filled than the normal one. Since this level and Above the Cheep Cheep Seas are on a split path, they share a common trait with each other, that being the usage of water spouts. Finally, to end the world, we have Dragon Eel's Undersea Grotto, the second underwater level and one that has a brand new enemy, and a pretty imposing one at that. The titular Dragon Eel is rather big and the focal point of the level, and defines the appeal of the beach theme. Getting chased by a giant sea creature feels something in line that would be only done in a beach theme. Apart from that, Dragon Eel does feature Eep Cheeps, a thematically fitting enemy, although not particularly more than any of the other ones of this world. On the other side of the split path, we have Frosted Glacier, a world that is meant to parallel Sparkling Waters. Despite that, however, it does have an interesting thing of its own. It might be the most in line with the pattern I have established. The world starts spinning star sky, and right off the bat we have the best example for a world-defining mechanic. Frosted Glacier differs from all the other worlds in the NSMBU series, as it takes place entirely during night. Its beautiful starlit sky is what defines the world and sets it apart from the other snow worlds of the series. And that is why a level based around interacting with those stars fits perfectly as the first level, even if it's their only appearance in the game. This level doesn't feature any specific snow enemy, only Goombas, Koopas, Piranha Plants, and Munchers. Additionally, it does also feature node blocks, which are a pretty classic Mario mechanic. Next up we have Cooligan Fields, which immediately introduces a twist in the world, one that will stick for all of it. The majority of Cooligan Field takes place on the Ice Tile set instead of Snow one featured in the previous level. It features more thematically generic mechanics in the form of the Cooligans and the Ice Flows, two mechanics that are taken straight out of an NSMBU. Prickly Goomba is the third level and somehow fits perfectly with the outline I gave earlier. It features an enemy that takes center stage in the level and only appear in this level, the Prickly Goombas, while also being the first level to use the secondary background of the world. Scaling the mountainside is the fourth level of the world, and it takes the world the athletic level, even if it doesn't play the athletic music. It uses scale platform and bullet bills, two mechanics that are often seen in sky levels, has a higher density of pits than the other levels, and features a secret acorn to help the player out. Next up is Icicle Cavern, and as a 5th level would, it features a decent bit of platforming throughout the level, although not to the same extent as the athletic level of the world. It features a variation of the theme in the form of the Frozen Cave, which has a unique background and a somewhat unique tile set. Those two levels are on a split path and therefore share a commentary with each other, at least they should be. There's only one thing that really binds the levels together, and it's how their mechanics both use the generic yellow moving platform as their model. I do believe it's the right time to clarify something. Earlier I pointed out that the middle levels all feature some sort of variation of the world theme, and I believe Frosted Glacier is the perfect example of how those variations differ. An X-2 will introduce an element to flesh out the world by introducing a more thematic element that will play a role all throughout the world, one that may even affect the gameplay. An X-3 will often introduce the secondary background of the world. It's purely an aesthetic change to show the progression of the world itself. Meanwhile, an X-4 or 5 has a variation of the theme that is completely unique to that level of the world. It will not make a reappearance and is purely meant to give some variety to the world. They may seem similar, but those subtleties are very important to understand the differences between all of them. And we once again reach a bit of a problem, because Icicle Cavern was the final numerical level of the world. Unlike Sparkling Waters and every other world, the ghost house is placed right before a castle, instead of right after the tower. This may not seem like a big problem at first, since we did establish that ghost houses are treated as numerical levels when it comes to this pattern, but it does seem a little weird that the final level of this world is a non-specific theme like this. No matter, as I do believe that Swaying Ghost House is a well-rounded finale to the world. Although it's by far the most unique one. It does feature a uniquely behaving auto-scroller and an emphasis on puzzle solving, which does feel big and important and when compared to the rest of the world, and it could be argued that the spooky nature of ghost houses is a natural ending point of the nighttime setting of Frosted Glacier. One thing I did brush over when looking at 4-5 that could potentially fit as the final level of the world. It does feature an appropriately big mechanic in the form of the big icicles, as well as Ice Bros, which are one of the most thematically fitting enemy in that world. Perhaps like Acorn Plains, its X-5 also takes the role of an X-6. One other plausible theory that my friend Baron came up with, and one that I found very intriguing, he believes that Flipper's Lake, the secret level of World 4, is the X-6 we're seemingly missing. While it cannot literally be, as it's not on the main path, I do believe it has the qualities needed to be considered one. Notably, how it uses a very thematically fitting enemy, with the Flipperus, a very big mechanic in the form of floating crates, and does capture the appeal of the world by being one of the level where the ice is at its most dangerous for the player. Even the inclusion of water feels fitting, as ice is nothing more than frozen water. With Flipper's Lake being the only icon level whose theme is the same as its home world, and being present in both boost mode and time attack challenges, it does make you wonder if it didn't hold a different spot early on. As we head into Soda Jungle, we're gonna start seeing many of the patterns having to be bent a little, even if it's in a way that often makes sense in the context of the world. We have also reached a point where every world doesn't have 6 regular levels. Let's see how Soda Jungle handles it, as the longest world in the game. Jungle of the Giants is the first level, and as always there's a striking level that goes on to define the world. While it doesn't have a unique new mechanic, it does have a pretty unique concept that still makes it memorable. And since this concept is about turning classic enemies giant, it also means that it's the most traditional feeling level in the entire game. The giant blocks would end up making a reappearance in the next 2 levels and in the tower. Additionally, the tower and the secret level would also end up introducing giant variation of other enemies. The next level, Bridge Above Poisoned Waters, is, just like the previous level, a perfect example of what an X-2 would be, featuring giant floating logs that were also present in World 5 of NSMBU, albeit in the other end of the split path. It's also the introduction of Poison, which has been a reoccurring jungle mechanic for most of the NSMB series. Bramble Woods fits the bill of the 3rd level by having an enemy that takes center stage, that enemy making its only appearance here. It's also the first level to use this world's secondary background, as well as the unique tileset alongside it. Since 5-2 and 5-3 on the split path, they share a common trait with each other. In this case, both of their main mechanic were used in the same New Super Mario Bros. U level. Witchway Labyrinth is the 4th level of the world, and it does not fit at all. The level revolves around entering different rooms that all have different set of obstacles in order to grab the star coins and potentially getting out. And while interesting, this has nothing to do with what I've outlined. This level doesn't seem to follow any specific convention. Instead, it's an introduction to the ghost area. The gimmick with this subsection of Solar Jungle is that you have to find at least one secret exit in order to progress to the world. And this level features a similar idea, although scaled down to a singular level. Instead, Painted Swampland is the proper 4th level of the world. A majority of the level takes place on rotated pipes moving above a giant poison lake, which I do believe does fit the description of a platforming focused level. Additionally, the level features a completely unique task in the background meant to resemble Van Gogh's The Starry Night painting. Next up is Deep Sea Ruins, an underwater dark level using the alternate underground music. While an underwater level might seem weird as the 5th level, this one puts a large focus on the stone eyes. They're often used to block the player's progress during the level, which does make them a pretty important platform throughout the level. This level also has a rather unique aesthetic due to its darkness and the water, as well as the lamp objects meant to light up the level. Since 5-4 and 5-5 on a split path, it means they both share a trait in common, that one being that they both feature blue circles as one of their main mechanics. And when you get out of the ghost section, you're confronted with one of the most bizarre sights in the entire game, another split path, this time between 5-6 and 5-7. While it may seem like it would cause some trouble, it all makes sense. In reality, both levels are supposed to serve as the conclusion of the world. Seesaw Bridge features giant rotating logs, which is meant to be the level's big and imposing mechanic, while also having enemies such as little piranha plants, filling up poison for the thematically fitting enemy. Meanwhile, Wiggler Stampede features a giant wiggler as its big mechanic, as well as thematically fitting enemy. Both levels put heavy emphasis on their massive poison lake, by both having mechanics that rely on its existence. So really, both levels could be considered the final level of the world. In fact, I would say both levels are the final of the world, together. If I were to call either of them a -6 of the world, it would probably be Seesaw Bridge. However, I would say that Wiggler Stampede feels like the proper end of the world. Its more gimmicky nature and reliance on Wiggler to progress does make it feel like the higher numerical level. Perhaps you could say that those are the unique traits of a X-7, but since this is the only proper one in the game, it's pretty hard to tell. Oh, and since those levels on a split path, they both share equality with each other. They both happen to have Wigglers as one of their main enemies. Rock Candy Mines is next in line, and has a bunch of things about it that makes it unique, which are all completely irrelevant to your analysis. Or are they? Fuzzy Clifftop opens up the world in a similar vein to 5-1. This level doesn't have any striking new mechanics. The ice piranha plants are technically new, but they don't take center stage like they may have in an earlier world. However, this level makes up for it by being very traditional. Everything about this world feels like an athletic level straight out of a Mario World. The comparison feels even more relevant when you look at the main mechanics. Fuzzies and stretch blocks, which did originate from Mario World, as well as Yoshi being in the level. I want to use this level to discuss another part of the first level that I've purposely ignored for now, and that's because it's a rather inconsistent one. The first level often happens to be a lull of misfit in this world. 1-1 is the only full-on grassland level with the acorn tree in the background, and for 2-1 it features a completely unique background with a blue sky. 4-1 is one of 2 levels that doesn't feature the ice tileset, and 5-1 is the only regular forest level without poison. All these traits make these levels feel sort of like a transition point, like you're not fully into the world yet, and I do believe it applies to 6-1 more than any of the previous one. This level uses the athletic music, and has little to no ceiling and background rocks. This makes the level stand out thematically from the other levels, but it does define Rock Candy Mines pretty well, as this world does start incorporating a lot more platforming than the previous ones. Next is Porcupuffer Falls, which introduces background rocks and prominent ceilings, which is a very important part of NSMBU's interpretation of the mountain. The main mechanics of the level are the really prominent water, alongside the Porcupuffer. And while neither of those are particularly mountain themed, a level with a very similar set of mechanics was present in New Super Mario Bros. Wii, in the form of 6-5. After the tower, we head to Wallwing's Nest, a vertical level that primarily focuses on Wallwings. While they are not a new enemy, they are rather prominent in the stage. They do have an enemy only ever used in this level with the Chain Chomps. The level doesn't introduce the secondary background of the world, that would be 6-2. Due to the orientation of the level designers had to end up using the generic vertical background clouds. This level does make use of semi-solid, but happens to be their only appearance in the world. Lightblock's Dark Tower is, despite what the name may imply, a regular numbered level. I mean, there's no way they're gonna put another tower after only a single normal level. Anyways, 6-4 is a vertical level and therefore more platforming focused, which has as its main mechanic the aforementioned light blocks, which acts as both a source of light and a moving platform. It does technically feature a completely unique background, but not only is it hard to see, it's also just a vertical variant of the blue underground. Those levels are quite interesting as they're on the split path, which is a complete anomaly because typically X-4 and X-5 are on the split path. In fact, every other level that I consider the 4th and 5th level of their respective world have been on a split path so far, which is why I grouped them together when giving their general descriptions, because they work in pairs. Meanwhile, X-3 usually are very different because they have a bigger focus on enemies. In this case, those levels are like opposites, with something that they still share in common. Both levels are vertical levels that are separated into two different zones. However, one of them is a dark cave, and the other has bright white clouds in its background. This split path is fascinating, and probably the most memorable one in the game. And because of that, Walking Piranha Plants is also an interesting level, because it is one that stands on its own rather than being tied to another level. And despite not being an athletic level, it does feature a wide variety of platforming-centric mechanics, as well as an enemy that is aided by one of those mechanics. It does technically feature a new background, only used in this level, but it is very similar to the one found in 6-2. It's somehow the final mountain state of the world, which is weird to say when it's to have 4 levels to go with the tower and the castle. The next level on our list is Thrilling Spine Coaster, and it's actually not the proper final level of the world. Not only is it not the highest numerical level, it's only accessible via a secret exit, which makes this level a sort of secret level. I say sort of because it's very much visible on the map, and it's a level tied to the color switch gimmick of the world, which means that it's a level meant to be found by a bigger part of the player base. So the real X-6 is Shifting Floor Cave. The level does feature an appropriately big and imposing mechanic, in the form of the shifting metal platforms that can potentially crush you. The enemies are thematically appropriate, notably the swoopers and spike tops. Despite not taking place in the main theme of the world, it does capture the appeal of rock candy mines. The entire world, even when it doesn't take place underground, often have ceilings and background rocks in the mountain levels to give off a similar feeling, so a full-on underground level does feel like the natural ending point of the world. Additionally, this level features a mechanic seen in the second tower, in the form of the Mario Bros. Platform. This is the only time a tower had an incidence on the normal level of the main game, which is pretty interesting, but doesn't fit with anything I've outlined. Marin Clouds is the penultimate world we're going to look at, and one that is a little more traditional than the previous ones. Although, with it being an athletic world, it should make it interesting to go through. Starting the world, we have Land of Flying Blocks, the typical sky level where you ride on a cloud platform. While it may not seem to have any new specific mechanics, the level does heavily feature rotating brick blocks, an element that has been present all throughout the game, and pushed to its natural endpoint. It's not new, but it's striking, and it defines not only Marin Clouds but New Super Mario Bros. U as a whole. It features pretty classic enemies such as Koopas and Piranha Plants, and makes heavy use of the pipes as terrain. Seesaw Shrooms is next, and as any second level does, it further uses an element synonymous with sky levels in Mario, mushroom platforms. While they appeared in the previous level and made their final appearance here, they are an element that further fleshes out the world, and they are the most iconic sky level mechanic. While none of the mechanics here originates from NSMBU, the combination of fuzzies with mushroom platforms has been seen in New Super Mario Bros. Wii 7-3, which shares nearly the same slot. Our next level is Switchback Hill, and it prominently features an enemy that would make one of his only appearance here, in the form of the Bullet Bills. It does have a different background than 7-1, but shares it with 7-2 since it's on the split path. The background shows Mario being inside of the cloud instead of above. Since it and the previous level are on a split path, they share a common trait with each other. Both levels never make use of the tall grass whenever they actually use tile terrain. The next level is Spinning Spirit House, and just like the one in World 5, has absolutely no bearing on the pattern established. So what is it then? Well, as I've previously stated, ghost houses exist among themselves first and within the world second. And this just so happened to be the last one as well. This is supposed to be the finale for the ghost houses. I believe the previous one were counted because they would otherwise not have enough levels to make the pattern works, so ghost house seems to only count whenever there's not enough levels. The actual fourth level is Bouncy Cloud Boomerangs. It and the next level, a quick dip in the sky, are in an interesting position, since in every other world they would fill the role of the platforming-centric or athletic levels. But how do they stand out next to a world full of athletic levels? Well, it's simple. They focus on a platforming mechanic that is heavily combined with an enemy. In 7-4, Goombas and Boomerang Bros are often used alongside the Bouncy Clouds to create a challenge that both use enemies and platforms. 7-5 does something very similar with water bubbles, fuzzies, and piranha plants. Both levels are sort of on a split path. They're technically both optional, as you can head straight to 7-6 and both only lead to 7-6. However, they do share a common trait with each other, that being that they're the only levels of that world that plays the Of-World theme. A cute little inversions, as those slots typically fill the world of athletic levels. This is also the final split path of the game, which may explain why it's so peculiar in its setup. Our next level and final one is Snaking Above Mist Valley. The level features a not big, but appropriately imposing mechanic in the form of the snake block. It features thematically fitting enemies such as Foos, Paratroopas, and Fire Bros, which also make their appearance in the tower and the castle of that world. This level captures perfectly the appeal of mirroring clouds. It's by far the level with the least amount of terrain, and the terrain it has is often comprised of small floating platforms. I believe the theme is also really fitting. World 7 is the last full world of the game, and the beginning of Mario's return to the Mushroom Kingdom. Representing the ever-approaching end of the game with the end of the day is actually quite clever. Peach's Castle is our final destination for today, and was genuinely the hardest one to understand. As you may already know, Peach's Castle is by far the shortest world in the entire NSMBU series with only 6 levels, which leaves us with 4 numbered levels, one of which is a secret level. How will that go? Let's find out. Meteor Moat is the first level and for one final time introduces a striking new mechanic that defines the world, with the unstable piece of terrains that float on lava. Lava is a really important mechanic in this world, and nearly every level either focuses on it or has an interesting variation of it. Those platforms also highlight how the Mushroom Kingdom has fallen apart as Bowser took over. This level still features classic elements such as Koopas and a high amount of brick blocks. Bony Beetles also make their first appearance outside of Tower-Raid Castle, and are one of the harder enemies to deal with, which does make this level appear as most threatening. Next level is Magma River Cruise. As I pointed out earlier, since this world is really short, this level combines both aspects of a second and a third level. The main mechanics of this level comes from one of the most iconic NSMBU level, 5-4, as well as using the Toxic Fog from 8-1. But the enemy is also very important in this level. The Monty Moles make their second and last appearance in this level, and the Magmalls and Mini Goombas only show up in this level. Those enemies are quite significant to the level, and I would say they are the main mechanics just as much as the platform. Rising Tides of Lava follow suit, and just like the previous levels, mixes the elements from multiple level slots. This level, as most of the third level, features the secondary background of the world in the ending zone, with the more zoomed in Peach's Castle. And just like the 4th and 5th level, has a unique variation on the theme only seen in this level, as well as focusing on platforming, with those screw-top platforms, which originates from New Super Mario Bros. Wii 1-5. It may also work as an X-6, as the mechanical mushrooms are a mechanic that encapsulates the appeal of the world. Mushroom platforms is synonymous with the Mushroom Kingdom, and them being mechanical fits with the ruined lava land that Bowser is currently ruling over. However, I believe that Red Hot Elevator Ride is the actual X-6 of this world, and if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. Up to this point, every last level was right before the world's castle, and the next level acts as the proper castle of the world. It does present a mechanic that is big and imposing, in the form of the constantly rising lava that will catch up if you let the platform stay stationary for too long. And while not using a theme seen in any of the other level, I do think that more than any others, perfectly captures the appeal of Peach's Castle. This is the castle, the one that has been built up for the entire game. It has lava and Bowser amps as a constant reminder that has been taken over, but still features a tileset that feels appropriately like Peach's Castle. The enemies, the bombs and Bowser amps, are thematically appropriate. Even the appearance of Goombas does fit, as they're Bowser's most iconic minion. And with that, this marks the end. We looked at every world, and were able to map out my outline decently well. Although since this is meant to be generalized, it also means that no world perfectly fit the mold. Here's the thing that you may have been wondering this entire time. Why would they design their world like this? Well, once again, I have not worked on the original game, so I don't really know. but I do think that the goal is to make a well-paced world. The first level hooks you in by presenting a new and fresh mechanic, a reason to care about the world, while the second level either shows a secondary theme that also plays an important role, or an element that is also important overall to the world. The third, fourth, and fifth level ramp up the difficulty more thoroughly by focusing either on an enemy or a platform, and the platforming-centric levels are placed after because they're typically less forgiving, often taking place above bottomless pits. Finally, the sixth level is meant to conclude the world with something big. It puts equal focus on the enemies and the platforms and encapsulates the world the most, often as a send-off to said world. All of this allows you to explore the world in a way that feels complete and whole. Thank you for watching this video. I hope it was interesting and informative. I do also hope they helped anyone making a new Super Mario Bros. Inspired fan project. If you feel like I've missed something, feel free to point it out in the comments. I'll try to answer all of them. And finally, I found the subject so fascinating that after I'm done, I'm gonna look at other Mario games to see if they have similar patterns we can observe. If there's a specific game you want me to cover, just tell me in the comments.